is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire, See Book 1, Chapters 23, 24, and 25. In these chapters, well, it turns out that when I was confused last episode about isn't the elder that's strapped to the boat the same as the Leviathan, who is the same as... Nope. There's another guy in the mix that I did not yet know about. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to George for commissioning this episode. What's up, George? Oh, man, there's only one more episode of coverage, and then we are done with this book, and I won't have another Will White property to cover until Reaper in January, and I am going to die. Reaper came out today. I happen to know that everybody on the internet has purchased it and listened to it or read it probably already, and I feel desperately left out, and I am super sad. So, anyway, moving on. These were really, really fun chapters, and I'm going to have to, keep an eye on my time because I will start to get carried away talking about one section of it, and then I will run out of time. So, chapter 23, I realized this, and I don't know if anybody caught it. This happens occasionally. It's my bad. I will accidentally listen a little bit too far on the next chapter before I realize, oh shit, I'm supposed to have stopped. And so I listened to the first paragraph of this chapter before realizing I was supposed to have stopped at the end of 22. So last episode, I mentioned Nibirius finding Nikothi's heart in this meadow, and it doesn't actually happen until now. And when we're in Nibirius's head, I hate this so much, guys. It's awful. I don't like Nibirius, and I haven't liked Nibirius. But what has happened to him with Nikothi's heart is so particularly awful. And I have really mixed feelings about it because, while it is awful, he also put himself in this position so that he would be... Because he thought he was, up for being emperor. Basically, he thought he could handle it. And I don't know, Nikothi's heart is what they assumed would be a requirement for becoming an emperor, right? This was the thing that would secure his spot. Now, the old emperor, whom we know is not well loved by Calder, or his people, I am assuming. The old emperor was struggling against the heart every day. This is something that when we are in Shera's perspective and she is, talking about the emperor, she seems to have a lot of respect for the fact that he was always under this strain and desperately trying to do the right thing despite what the heart was telling him. And yet, also in Shera's perspective, we see what happens on Nikothi's island and how it seems like he really loses it for a bit there. And then he tries to play it off like it was all a big test. But Shera is unconvinced, as am I. So I don't really like the fact that the emperor, whom nobody really liked to begin with, or I say nobody, but a lot of people didn't like, he was putting up a constant fight and it still was getting the better of him sometimes. And then we've got Nibirius swanning in and really thinking that he is going to be as much of a match for the influence of the heart as the old emperor. And I genuinely want to sit down with Nibirius before all of this happens and ask him why he thinks he's going to be able to handle it. Because it seems pretty clear. Everybody knows that this thing is too much. Like, that is part of why the emperor is so remarkable. Now, granted, people didn't know that he was using it to stay immortal. They basically thought he was some kind of god, and Shera got let in on that secret. But after he's killed, I am assuming everybody begins to, like, that news begins to spread. People begin to find this out, right? Because it seems like it's fairly common knowledge at this point, or else they wouldn't be hanging their hopes on the next emperor on finding a heart. So, if they know that he had one, but they also are aware of the effects that it can have and the madness that, like, just getting too close to any, like, elder shit can inflict on somebody, why don't they realize that the fact that the emperor could resist the influence of the heart points out exactly how unique and strong a person he was? I feel like that should serve as evidence itself that whether people liked him or not, he was a rare breed of man. And it seems as if everyone is sort of acting like the heart is responsible for all his uniqueness and power, rather than understanding that the heart was, like, in more cases, a detriment in some ways. I won't say in more cases, but in, like, plenty. I feel, I don't know, it just seems really sus to me whenever somebody is like, oh, you know, this terrifying tool of unspeakable power and evil, I can definitely handle it. Bitch, who are you? You know, and that's not to say I don't think that there are people out there who are unusually good, unusually strong-willed, but I want to hear your reasoning behind thinking you're one of them. So Nibirius obviously isn't. He is so completely taken over by this thing. It's wild. He almost gets to a point where he has awakened it. And I don't even want to know what the fuck this thing would do if it got awakened. Like, that's just not thinking about it. So then we go to Calder. And he is with Andal and Foster. He couldn't seem to think straight anymore. Now, all he wanted to do was leave. He'd found out the truth about Jerry, and Nibirius had run off. That much was a relief. Now that the chronicler was gone, someone else could deal with him. Maybe the consultants would kill him. Maybe he would escape, but Calder didn't care. The heart was important to the world and to Calder's future. Why? We still don't know. Calder has ambitions of his own. Did he want to be emperor? I just don't know. I don't know what he wants to do. Anyone who held it could make a case for the emperor's throne and thus get in Calder's way. He couldn't live in a world with a second emperor just like the first. He wouldn't do it. He would change the empire first. Oh, I'm just dying to know. Like, what is your plan? What is it that you want to do? I just don't see Calder wanting to be emperor himself. So this is the only reason that I could see Andal, but I you know, like, maybe it is Andal. That's what I keep going back to. I don't know. Maybe we're meant to think that, though. I don't know. So the Calder had told the ship to wait for them around the back of the island. And there's this moment here. Well, it comes a little later, actually. But Andal is like, why don't we have the boat meet us at such and such spot? And Calder stops him and is like, I give the orders. I'm the captain. It's my ship. And Andal's like, okay, what are your orders? And he's like, what you said. It's like, ugh, Calder. And Andal says, oh, if you insist. Calder knelt and placed a hand against the ground. You think that rock has relevant information, sir? Andal asked. On the surface, his tone was completely respectful. I love this writing style. On the surface, his tone was completely respectful. End of sentence, new paragraph. A lesser writer would explain this to us. And God help me, but I have been reading a lot of books lately. Not for the show, but like, you know, just stuff that I'm listening to on audiobook for fun on my free time. Where, they fucking over-explain everything. I get it. I'm not an idiot. On the surface, his tone was completely respectful. However, underneath, he could hear an impatience and skepticism that bubbled to the surface, like, I get it. I know what you mean. That's all you needed to say. It's on the surface, and I can fill in the rest. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you for believing in my basic intelligence. So, we get to hear exactly how Calder sorts through everything that he is learning when he touches the rock and begins to read what's happening. And this is really interesting. Essentially, there are a few things happening that are way louder than everything else. So, we have Nibirius, and he is trying to join with the heart. He hears Nibirius' voice. He hears the voice of the heart itself. The thoughts held the same icy, nauseating, unspeakably old feel that he'd come to recognize as the signature of the dead mother. The heart of Nkothi was in Nibirius' possession. But that wasn't the only significant event. One was Urziah Woodsman, drawing on the strength of a sand-born hydra and carrying 2 hatchets that yearned to split his enemies in half. And then Calder sees his opponent. And it's really interesting getting to see her from his perspective. Where Urziah was drawing on the power of a single chimera through his vessel, she was bursting with the fury of a dozen beasts. Strong wills tore at her muscles, pressed against the insides of her skin, and shredded her from the inside. The chimera within her seemed to fight each other as much as they fought Urziah. Just from what he was feeling now, he couldn't understand why Urziah's enemy hadn't torn herself apart. She seemed to be restraining all of those chimera with nothing more than the sheer force of her will. And if she ever succeeded in focusing that power in a single direction, no soulbound could stand a chance. This is fascinating, because we have been in her head before, and we know how much of a struggle it has been and how inadequate she has felt so much of the time. And to know that she has this potential, I mean, it wasn't obvious to us as readers that it was there. We knew that she had incredible power, but we knew how much of a struggle it was for her all the time. And I really thought that she was doing the best she could with it. And I mean, she is, but I mean, when I say the best she could, I mean really the best that it was possible to get out of this, you know? According to Calder, there is way more that she could get out of this. And the fact that she is still managing to make it work at all is a testament to how likely it is she could get the most out of it. And if she, his theory here is that she would be stronger than a soulbound. We saw her reaction to Shara becoming soulbound at the end of the last book, and she was super jealous and irritated. I really would love to see her realize that she could outdo Shara in some ways if she manages to really narrow it down and focus all of these sources of power. Because I think if somebody straight up told her, you would be way more formidable than a soulbound, that would give her a sort of laser-like focus. She already is struggling, but I feel like it's because she doesn't really know what's possible here. And I'm curious if Lucan can tell, because we've been in his head, but he hasn't really stopped to think of, all of his thoughts are about Shara at all times, you know? I wonder if Calder is overall a stronger reader than Lucan. It's hard to know because I'm not really certain what anybody's, is there sheer strength, or can one of them just be particularly good at one type of reading and another be particularly good at a different type of reading? I don't know how that works, but this is just really interesting because Calder is genuinely concerned about Urziah, and he doesn't know how to explain this to Andal or Foster. He has them come with him, expresses his concern, but Andal is he's sort of derisive about it, you know, genuinely amused at the fact that this guy thought Urziah needed their help, because there's not an easy, quick way for Calder to explain what it is that Urziah is up against here. So, yeah, it becomes a fucking problem. So let's see. Then he stumbles across this other sort of shout coming from the rock. Only 100 yards behind Calder and a little below, the consultant prisoner was bending over a bronze blade. So this is Lucan, and he's struggling to awaken this thing. And Calder is stopping and like looking around, and he's like, oh God, I don't know what I should do. Nibirius thinks he can control the heart and thus the entire Grey Island. And I thought maybe that that sentence would be followed by one with, Calder wasn't sure if that was true, but no, it's followed up with the sentence, and Calder believed him. I am assuming that if Nibirius thinks he can do that, it's because the heart is telling him that he can do that. And I think that the heart would tell him the truth, at least on that front. But that was only if Nibirius could awaken it. Usually awakening an object took time and strength in conjunction with the object's significance. Anything as substantial as a great elder's heart could take months to awaken and years to bond with. There was always the possibility that Nicothi herself was helping Nibirius along, and Calder had no idea what she was capable of. Still, he had more urgent threats. The blade behind him, for instance, was beginning to feel very dangerous. And I was really surprised by that the blade was like beginning to take a little bit more precedence over Nibirius and the heart. I was like, really? And there was something about the situation with Lucan that Calder didn't understand, which scared him. And I'm like, yeah, none of us really understand it, to be honest, but it's fine. So he then thinks about the quote from Cydesthenes, when in doubt, seek first to preserve life. That wasn't Calder's favorite quote, but it seemed appropriate here. Rather than trying to pin down Nibirius or killing Lucan, supporting his crewmen came first. So he decides that the most important thing is getting everybody the fuck off of the island. And getting Urziah is the first step in that. Then we cut back to Jerry. And Jerry is... this moment. I feel so frustrated with her. I really like her in a way. I like her the most in the flashbacks because it's before she started pulling all of this extra shit. But right here, she has such trust in what the Cabal has told her about what this bracelet can do. And it's so fucking... It's... I understand in theory being like, okay, they said it'll do this. They are my seniors and they understand this better than me, so I'm going to trust that. However, we know that Jerry has come to the conclusion already that they don't really know as well as she does, what's best for the group. So she has, in some cases, just gone off and done what the fuck she thinks is best because they seem to be so out of touch or to not really get it. And I find it very troubling that she is so willing to bend to their assumptions here. That I'm saying all of that, but I have to acknowledge she doesn't have a lot of options right now. You know, this is the one thing that she was given. So what is she supposed to do? Just not use it? That said, it just is such a great example of a person stepping into a power that they don't understand and thinking that they've got the research behind them or that their intent is good enough. And it's just, no, girl. So finally she sits down because she's indecisive for a minute and realizes that this is not like her. And so decides, all right, I'm just going to take action. Closing her eyes, she focused her intent. She had used lesser summoning objects like this 3 times before, and none of them had been exactly alike, but she began the ritual she had been taught as a little girl. I who remain awake must call to those in dream. My power is lacking and my wisdom is dim. In ignorance I seek your light. In weakness I seek your aid. And she chants this and thinks to herself, I wasn't at fault, Calder. I was right and I can prove it. Just wait for me. Bitch, shut the fuck up. Truly. whatever you believe in with the elders, like, that is genuinely not the fucking point. And I cannot believe you don't get that. Do you not understand? Like, I would love to know how she'd react if she found out Calder had been lying to her this whole time. You know, regardless of what about, it doesn't matter. That's not it. Granted, her believing in the elders and being one of the sleepless, like, Calder doesn't like that. He doesn't believe in that or agree with it. But that is so not what his issue is here. So then we go back to him. And he's standing near the area where Urziah is fighting. I love this. Get ready, Urziah's inside. They were now inside the massive fake boulder, which arched overhead. It shook around them, dust drifting down from the stone ceiling. Foster looked up at the shaking rock and snorted. Oh, really? How could you tell? Keen intuition and instinct. So, they go in. This is the moment where they see Urziah fighting. And Andal is just like, wow, yeah, we're really rescuing him from this mortal danger. As he watched, Urziah swung a hatchet in an arc that sliced a pole in half. The blonde consultant vaulted over the attack, swinging a midair kick at the side of Urziah's head. He blocked with his hide-wrapped forearm, sending up a crack that echoed all the way to Calder. Then he gathered his strength, driving his fist toward the consultant. She managed to duck the strike, leaving his punch to hit solid stone. The low wall cracked, shaking the entire arena. Yeah, this is a kind of strength that is just, it does not compute, it doesn't register. If she pulled herself together, well, better to be safe. Urziah wouldn't like it, but Calder was not above shooting a woman in the back. One of Yenzir's most famous quotes. While honor has never won a single battle, deceit wins wars. Look, I don't like to be like true, because that feels very cynical, but I mean true. I am very cynical. Above him, Calder felt the heart of the dead mother blazing cold like the fire of a dead star. The trance changed. So this is when he tunes into Lucan, and the knife is actually floating in the air in front of him. Calder couldn't see the world around him, but he managed to speak. Andal, Foster, I was wrong. We need to leave. They may have responded, but he couldn't tell. His senses were swallowed up once again. I will be reborn. I will remake this world. I will give my life and will receive life anew. With a great effort, Nibirius brings all his intent to bear on the heart of Nkothi, striking a final, heavy hammer blow. In his cell, Lucan feels the life of the dagger taking shape, the fire beginning to flicker to life. Wisps of pale green light float around the blade, drifting like ghosts. You are the taker of lives, the thief of secrets. You are that which turns power against power. You are the death of the powerful. At the same instant, Jyrene sits in her own cell, only yards from Lucan. She holds in her hands a blighted circle of darkness, a twisted tool that seems to scream with anguish. But that scream will not bring aid. It is the squeal of prey that lures a predator. Word? What does that mean? Yikes. So at this point, Nibirius raises the heart into the air. I will be reborn. Lucan drives the blade into the ground. You are called Siphron, the Whispering Death. In Calder's mind, it was like 3 bombs exploding at once. And Foster, who is also a reader, but not actively like sensing anything at the moment, he even is like, what the fuck just happened? So this is when Calder is like, we have to get the fuck out of here. I can't interrupt Urziah's fight because I genuinely think that might kill him. If he survives, we will come back for him. But if we stay, that's just, none of us are getting out of here. So I love this so much. They come to the top of the shaft and find Nibirius dancing around with the heart in his hand. Andal and Calder pulled their guns, but Foster was faster. He clubbed Nibirius over the back of the head with the butt of the pistol. Nibirius starts to get up and, just almost indignantly, turn this power that he has unlocked on Foster. Foster hit him again, and this time Nibirius' eyes rolled up into their sockets. He fell on his chin, the heart tumbling from a limp hand. And Andal says, hitting people, you're more likely to kill them than knock them senseless. And Foster says, oh, I'm aware. Never change, Foster. You adorable little weirdo. I just truly, that line got me cackling. I was listening to this and I was just like, good for you. So, oh God, you guys, I just realized I'm a half hour into this and I haven't even finished with the first chapter of the 3. I really need to get a move on. Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead to the part where Calder is trying to figure out what it is that they can do to get out of here in time. And an idea struck him and his hand shot to the vial organ in his jacket pocket. He takes the heart and chucks it into the water. And then we jump to 24, where we get to see the first time that he deals with Kellerak. And reminder, when Kellerak was mentioned in the previous section, I was just I don't understand. Wait, aren't they the same person? No, we didn't know anything about Kellerak yet. We didn't understand who he was. So it turns out he is a great elder and is almost like a devil. And by devil, I mean the kind of devil that lives in myths, not exactly like the devil in the Bible who guards the underworld. I mean the devil in a lot of American folklore or English folklore sometimes, where it's the devil decided to make a deal, and said that you could play the fiddle really well. I don't know, that's the first story that comes to mind. But you know what I mean? It's the devil in those stories has a lot more personality and is a lot more like a day-to-day trickster type. And it's interesting when Kellerak gets to talking later, and he mentions that his new name, because he's lived for so long, his name has changed a few times, means collector of souls. And he's I don't even know really what souls are. I don't care about that. I sort of enjoy the name because it sounds very threatening, but I don't get it. Kellerak is chained to a drowned city somewhere beneath the Aeon, but reports of his activity continue throughout the centuries. Contemporary legend suggests that one may summon his attention in the same way that one summons a lesser elder spawn, namely through focused application of intent. However, any plea requires a sacrifice, an object valuable to you, tossed into the Aeon where his minions can retrieve it. There is no guarantee that such a sacrifice will warrant his attention, only that without it you may be assured of summoning only apathy. To survive a bargain with the Soul Collector, one must be exceptionally clever and exceptionally desperate. And then we get to see Calder as a young babe, and he is making his first deal in order to get him, Gyrene, and his dad out of danger from all of the guards in this prison that he just broke them out of. So he just does basically I summon thee, please help, oh God. It's not really sophisticated in any way. It's just a desperate, I will do anything kind of vibe, which is exactly, apparently, what Kellerak responds to. So, one second, he floated in freezing black. The next, he sat on a low couch next to a blazing fire. For those who have read Cradle, this has very, very strong surreal vibes for me. You all know what I'm talking about. He was dry and warm, resting in a sitting room straight out of the ancient empire. The walls were monuments of polished stone, supported by intricately carved columns. He should have been startled by the abrupt transition, but he was mostly just relieved. So, at this point, Kellerak is like, hey, what's up? Most of the people who try and summon me, they don't give me shit. but you have given me some really good stuff. By far his most remarkable features were his eyes, or rather the device that covered them. A band of some silver metal encircled his whole head with bolts where his eyes should have been. This sort of reminds me of the Inquisitors in Mistborn. It was as though someone had fashioned him a steel blindfold and then bolted it into his sockets, which sounds awful. And Calder doesn't know what he means when he's like, you've given me gifts, and he's just rolls with it. Like he has to, Calder's an experienced con man, and he knows that it's best to act like you know what the fuck you're talking about. So at this point, Kellerak summons like a little table with all the shit that Calder has chucked in the ocean. A small hammer that he had invested to break stone, a spool of thread invested to bind a man's hands and feet. They were his contingency tools, packed to help break his father out of prison and abandoned into Candle Bay when they proved themselves unnecessary. And at this point, I didn't realize it. Calder doesn't know who this is. So he asks Kellerak, what should I call you? And when Kellerak tells him, Calder is like, oh, fuck. God, okay. Okay, I can do this. I just gotta be really careful. And Calder's like, I am trying to get out of Candle Bay. 2 of my companions and I are trapped. A number of armed men are closing in around us. I had hoped to call something big enough to carry us to shore. Kellerak laughed. I did not realize you were so young, even for one of your kind. I doubt you understand how improbable your survival was. I'm beginning to, he said honestly. Yes, I think you are. I have a servant in your area who might serve you well. Very well indeed. Of course, there's the matter of price. And Calder tries to be like, well, what about this shit I already gave you? And Kellerak is like, bitch, this is the entry fee. This is the cover charge. No, that's not it. And Calder immediately is like, not my soul. And Kellerak is like, yeah, no, I have no interest in that. It's fine. I want that key. And Calder is like, okay, yeah, great, done. And Kellerak takes the key. He says he'll take the key when Calder leaves this dream space. But warns him, basically, the first taste is always free. I hope you enjoy your first taste. I do look forward to the second. And it's surprising to me how well the second seems to go. I think it has to do with how high value Nikothi's heart is. Like, if Calder had been this desperate and didn't have something that fucking intense to bargain with, it could have gone real badly. But it seems like he manages to come out of the second one pretty well, all things considered. So he crawls out of the water, and Jerry is like, okay, did you fucking figure anything out? And at first she's like trusting him, and then she doesn't, and I found that very amusing. Roderick starts to say, I'm going back. They're taking me back. And Calder has to be like, nope, we're not doing that. The wooden scaffolding, which had surrounded the testament like a cage for 2 years, exploded outward in a shower of splinters. Debris the size of small trees flew halfway across Candle Bay, sending up sprays of water wherever they landed. This sounds so cinematic. I love this so much. Calder tries to do the whole, I'd like to introduce my friend, and have this fucking thing come out of the water. It does not play along at all. He tries a couple times. The timing doesn't work out. He looks like an idiot. And then the guards start to like rush them. And just as they're getting toward them, the Latheton comes out of the water. And this thing lays absolute waste to these motherfuckers. One of the guards raised his pistol and fired in a puff of smoke. It did exactly what Calder had expected. Nothing except to make the elder target that particular victim first, which is always how that goes, is it not? The person who's stupid enough to just be like, I am very willing to harm you. Of course you're going to be the first one it takes out. Why wouldn't you? Its claws closed on the guard deceptively fast, and then the Leviathan swallowed him whole. Yo! Just... gone. That... I don't want to know what happens if you get eaten by an elder. I feel like that shit isn't over. Like, it looks over from the outside. Is it? I just feel like that's a bad fate, man. So Calder is trying to grab his dad, and his dad is like, I am not going in the water with that fucking thing. And Calder is like, oh, look, I get it, man, but, and shoves him in. He turned to Jerry, planning to help her down, but she had already executed a perfect dive. Far from showing terror, she stopped to tread water, staring up at the gargantuan body with a grin on his face. And this is the moment when Calder looks at her and is like, God damn, that bitch is fine. And I think this is it. This is the night that cements the two of them being very into one another. They're each just a little bit crazy, you know? She's crazy in a way that I have a lot less sympathy for, but nevertheless. So Roderick reaches the deck first, and Jerry gets out too and is like, I don't know how to steer this. And Calder just tells her to like use the wheel, and she's like, we can't, that's not good enough. And he reaches down and presses his hands against the deck, and this is when he becomes soulbound to the ship. Because he is desperately needing its help, because he has worked on this ship over time and has put a ton of his own intent into it, literally like spilled his own blood here. And what happens when he becomes soulbound with it? This is so cool sounding. He'd only attempted awakening one time before on a mirror, and that had been a disaster. Doing it correctly was supposed to take days, even weeks, and you could never predict the full effects. But with this ship, the project he had helped create, it seemed so easy. The ship changed around him. Planks welded together as though the deck was made from a single seamless plank of polished wood. Holes gouged by musket balls filled in. The nails rippled and flowed until they had melded with the planks, almost indistinguishable patches of iron strength. The hull merged smoothly until it looked like a green-black shell, the railings fusing together until the whole ship was made of one piece. He could sense it all, the same way he could sense his own skin. Sails unfurled from the yard like wings spreading from a dragon's back. These weren't made from canvas, but from a stretch of greenish skin, the material thin enough that the moon glowed through. Faintly, Calder could see veins pulsing in the sails, carrying the blood of the ship. Listen, that's cool and all, but also I really could do without it. I'm just saying, I don't care for all of the flesh imagery in this book. It gives the book and this series its own distinct flavor, its own particular kind of aesthetic, but it's a flavor and aesthetic that I do not like. That's not to say I don't like the books, but you get what I mean. It makes me so uncomfortable. Just like intensely so. So this is when the Leviathan, he like tunes into that. It had its own goals, from those as simple as defending its territory to complex plots that Calder couldn't comprehend. It did not resent its servitude. This was one subtle step in a long, intricate, delicate plan that would span centuries. If it stayed enthralled to Calder for the rest of his human lifespan, the Leviathan wouldn't notice any more than a mountain noticed the dying of summer grass. It would live on, having made another move in a game as slow and distant as the stars. I love this, because this was what I kept wondering, is like, if the Leviathan is so fucking strong, why is it getting bossed around? Why can they make it do this? And I assumed after this deal that it was just doing it because it was ordered to. But no, it has its own reasons for being willing to do this. And it is so old and so sort of like out of time. It doesn't care. Like, this isn't a problem. And that makes so much sense. Like, that is the kind of explanation that for me really sinks in and feels like it's beautifully done. You know, there are just times like that where things come together in a story and you're like, oh, not only do I, quote, buy that, I use the word buy when you needed to convince me and you managed it, but I'm still aware that needed to be explained, and that was probably like something you had to come up with. This is the kind of thing where I'm like, no, I feel like that's how it's been. Like, that just feels like I just didn't have all the information. I love it. With one clawed hand, the elder tore Candle Bay Imperial Prison open like a gutted fish. Yo, I was not expecting that, and that is fucking baller. Oh my god, I love this so much. There's all these alchemists with fucking like needles and syringes and shit, and there's a guy like strapped to a table. Another mental order from Calder, and the monster ripped the room to pieces, leaving the prisoner free. When it was done, Calder's sight fuzzed at the edges, and he collapses. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, did he free everybody from that prison? I mean, God bless him. I'm sure some of them like were terrible people that maybe deserved to be locked up in general, but I don't think anybody deserved to be in that place. And he wakes up and he has intense reader burn, which makes sense because he just like put himself through a fucking lot. And I love this. He like shuffles, comes and lands on his face, and he uses his little tentacles, and it seems to like help with his pain from the reader burn. I don't know exactly how he does that, but it's like sort of adorable and sweet that it's like, have you guys heard about how the purring of a cat can actually be healing? Like, there is something about the frequency that a purr functions on that, like, it does something to help with like lowering your heart rate, something like this. And it sort of makes me think of that. And I was so ready for Calder's father to like, for something at the last second to wind up going really wrong. Either his father wouldn't be able to leave, like they would have done something to him to make it so that he physically couldn't make himself go, or that there would be some kind of like, he would be bound to the place in another way and he would be in pain after leaving. Like, it just seemed like they were able to do such a number on him that I was not sure where that could end. And it seems like this, like, his father is fine. Yeah, I'm really, I don't know if that's going to stay, but, and then let's see, Jerry shouted from above and something landed on the surface of the deck. No, not something, someone he could feel even through the headache and the solid wood of the ship's deck. His heart quaked with a pure instinctive fear. He staggered out of bed and whispered, "Hide." Now, I think that's, what's her face? The Luna Lovegood, white-haired, what's her name? I feel like that's her. However, I could be very wrong. We'll see. But we go to chapter 25 here. And I am very proud of myself that I'm starting the final chapter with about 15 minutes to go. Look at me, doing all right. So chapter 25, Calder is with Calorak already when we start this chapter. Calorak met him on a frozen battlefield. It's interesting to me that this is the setting this time. Before, it was this very comfortable seating area with a fire, and it's all meant to make him feel cozy and safe. Now, it feels like Calorak is sort of posturing a little bit. Like, reminder, I am nobody to fuck with. However, it could also be the influence of Nikothi's heart. You know, I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Calder stood in the midst of a battle locked in a single instant as though he had stepped into a painting. Men stood behind him, rushing forward with armor and spears to meet the charge of the monsters ahead. The humans were sweating, panting, desperate, their teeth bared in defiance, fighting shoulder to shoulder with their boots set against the ground. Many had bled through bandages or tried to hold their armor together with nails and bits of rope. They faced an army of nightmares, elder spawn of every stripe, not just the children of Nicothi, stitched and blended together from the corpses of men, but monsters of all kinds. The giant worms of Cathanikar, I think, stuck emerging from their burrows in this world of frozen time. The shadow men of Urgnot, the ever-shifting soldiers of Tharlos, the amphibious horrors of Othagor. The monstrosities filled the earth and sky, frozen in the middle of crawling toward the men like dogs to a feast. Black smoke hung as pillars in the air, and the sky glowed an unnatural red. Yikes. Yikes. So Kellerak is lounging on, basically, like, there are two men who are carrying an injured man on their shoulders. The wounded man had snatched up a spear from nearby and was beginning to turn around as though he meant to fight with a bleeding wound in his stomach. Kellerak sat on the wounded man's injured belly, the spearhead propping up his back. It should never have supported him, but everything in this frozen tableau was as solid as stone. He rested his feet on the helmet of one of the nearby soldiers, leaning back against the spear, and let out a satisfied sigh. Wow. That is a fucking image. Genuinely, I want to know what Will White's thought process was behind deciding on this setting and the way this is. Like, I feel like it has to have something to do with Nicothi and it being the heart that he is offering up. Maybe it also has something to do with it being near the Grey Island. I don't know. But regardless, Kellerak is like, hey, grown up a bit. You're still like a kid, but you're older. And he says, I was compelled to appear before one of my competitors should take your gift away from me. And I love Calder. You know you're my favorite customer. And Kellerak's like, yeah, you're starting to be mine, I gotta say. I tend to begin negotiations by questioning my opponent's goods, but I suspect you know exactly how valuable this is, don't you? And he's like, later on, I'm not only going to grant your wish, but like, this is so valuable, I kind of still owe you. So I'm going to give you a rad weapon too. And after Calder is like, oof, I bet I could have bargained and even gotten more out of that, actually, because he seemed truly impressed with this. But what can you do? At least I got a weapon. I taste my sister's agony in this. For one whose trade was death and rebirth, she's having quite the trouble coming back to life, is she not? Calder and Kellerak laughed together, though the human suspected he was missing out on quite a bit of context. So, I loved this. He tries to be like, I'm in some trouble. And the first thing that Kellerak says is like, oh, I know that bitch you married was lying to your ass this whole time. That really does suck. And Calder has to be like, and like get it together for a second because he gets so angry here. And there's this moment that's not quite what I meant. I think you'll be surprised with my perspective on pacification sects, boy. What they seek is a world of harmony between our kind and yours, admirable if it weren't entirely misguided. We require totally different conditions in which to flourish. And I liked the fact that he just honestly tells him this. Like, basically, the only way that we are going to be happy is if y'all are enslaved to us. Like, that's it. That's just it. And you're always going to be coming to me for favors because I'm more powerful than you. Like, y'all think you won. Maybe to you. But we can bide our time in a way that y'all can't. So Calder has to refocus it and be like, someone has summoned what I believe to be, and again he interrupts, one of Nicothi's handmaidens, and it was your wife that did the summoning, though you knew that already, didn't you? It was quite a surprise for her, I can assure you. And Calder is like, wait, was it? He thinks that she did this purposefully, that she knew what she was doing. And Kellerak is like, yeah, what she was trying to summon was just to get her out of there. She was supposed to get something much lesser. And then she could get out, get the heart back, and deliver it to her people. But she didn't understand that using that artifact in the presence of her heart during the awakening of a blade that once pierced a different heart, Nkothi was in such a position of power on that island that she was able to decide what was summoned. And she sent one of like her most powerful beings. She thinks she has a better chance of victory if she resets the board. Only you and I know that she's already lost. And Calder says, I need to escape. Kellerak's like, oh, right. And if you want to save your wife. And Calder straight up goes, fuck that bitch. She did this shit. She will figure it out or not. Not my goddamn problem. And I was like, oh, shit. Calder, that is cold-blooded. I was not ready for that, I will be honest. Later on, he reconsiders, and he's acting more like I kind of expected, but he really straight up has a moment where he is about to toss her to the wolves, and honestly, I am not even that mad at him for that. Because there really does come a point where, like, somebody is actively courting disaster. You can't keep saving them from some shit that they are looking for. That's not... like, there's no point to it. That's you wasting your energy and stepping in front of something they allegedly want. You know, like, granted, she didn't do this shit on purpose, but that's part of the point. She doesn't know what she's doing, and she's still acting like, I'm right, and you'll see, Calder. Bitch, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not right. Not only are you not right, but you are so not right that you don't even know what you fucking did here. Like, you're sitting here using this device thinking, oh, this will get me out. And not only does it not just get you out the way you thought, it does some whole other shit that would kill you and everybody else. Now, I am assuming that's not what you wanted or intended. I don't think that's you. However, you're too fucking stupid to know you are responsible for all of that. And that is so much more dangerous. Somebody who, like, genuinely means well but doesn't fucking understand the shit they're working with is scarier to me than a person who actively is trying to do something evil. Like, evil, that has a particular intent that you can step in front of. But stupidity is chaotic. You don't know how that's going to go wrong. You don't know what they're going to decide is the smart thing to do next because they don't function with logic. And, it's just... Anyway, I was low-key proud of Calder in this moment. Like... I wasn't mad that he changed his mind later. I really wasn't. But him being as fucking brutal as he was here, I was kind of into it. And Kellerak is like, you know what? That's what I would have told you to do. So good for you. Like, that's smart. And that's sort of what later on Calder is like, ooh, that guy told me this is a smart choice. If he approves, I kind of feel like that's a big red flag. So maybe I better not do that. Which is smart. Like, truly, that's a logical way to approach this. But, like I said, I was proud of him right here for a second. And this is when one of the soldiers reaches out. Kellerak says you need a deeper link to the Leviathan. And one of the soldiers reaches out, grabs Calder by the forearm, and burns a handprint into his flesh. The print of a hand was seared into Calder's forearm, but it looked nothing like the hand that Kellerak had used. It was surely not the mark of a human. The red, burned flesh bore the shape of 6 clawed, double-jointed fingers tipped in shallow claws. It looked more like the Leviathan's hand than any man's. That's kind of dope. Honestly, the idea of like a human hand leaving a print that is definitely not human, that's a little spooky. I like it. And I love this. Calder tries to be like, thank you, because he knows if he isn't grateful that he could be punished for that, but he can't even like get the words out because he's in so much pain. Kellerak waved away his thanks. Given the value of this offering, I'll ignore your lack of any other gift. And in fact, I think that it still leaves me in your debt. You'll need a sword. And he tosses one to Calder. You shouldn't use this against the handmaiden because she will counteract its effects and tear you to pieces. But against lesser spawn, it should serve you quite well. So then we go back to Jyrene. And she is sitting there with, it'll free me. The Cabal told me it would. I just have to be patient. And she hears Lucan busting the fuck out of here. And I had forgotten this moment where Lucan, like, hears her calling to him and stops and talks to her, but then still fucking leaves her there. Again, what a baller move. I feel like Lucan saying, I learned a lot from you, Jyrene. I'll be back. And then turning and walking out. Low key, like, sunglasses dropping onto his face. Bum, 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 bum. Like, I honestly was just impressed. And she is flipping the fuck out, understandably, because shit is crashing down around her. Calder, for his part, snaps back to himself, and he's on the edge of the island. And let's see. He sensed the child of Nikothi's mind. It wasn't deep and fathomless like Kellerak or the Liathatan, but simple and focused. So, I don't have a lot of time, but there's a fight with this child. And he slices this thing, and it just, slices his blade in a shallow cut along the side of its belly. Then he wiped the blade on the grass and sheathed it. The child staggered forward another step, the wound in its side turning black. Darkness spidered out from the cut, crawling over the blue-white flesh like moss devouring a boulder. In seconds, the child of Nikothi was covered in black. It deflated, collapsing into a mess of ash and wet black rot. Yo. That sounds so rad. I would love to see that on screen. Like, really. As much as I love, and I mean love, Cradle, I do feel like this series would lend itself to a film better. I feel like, Cradle, you need like a TV series. That feels so involved to me. I feel like this story, though, you could get away with a bigger blockbuster kind of thing. So far, anyway. I'm not far enough into it, really, for my opinion to carry a lot of weight. So, Calder makes a mental call. I love this. It comes backed by the authority of the true master. Good. The Liathatan hastens to obey. The more the human bargains with Kellerak, the closer his plans will align with the Liathatan's own. That was too disturbing for Calder to think about at the moment, so he stored it away for another time. Yeah. Yikes. That really gave me pause, and I am in love with it. Truly, the idea that these guys have their own shit going on, and we may never see this develop into anything because of the distance of time, but I really like that being another larger game being played. I just think that's so fun. And it adds a lot more interest to the elders as well. And it comes up out of the water. It stood underneath the cliff and it hisses, and Calder realizes that it's him, like, acknowledging him. I hope you're ready to return to the dead mother, he said, walking towards the monsters. Something flapped loudly behind him, like a flag snapping in the breeze, and then a familiar weight settled on his shoulder. Dead mother! Shuffles bellowed right into his ear. Oh, I love Shuffles so much. So, then Calder really begins to take them the fuck out. And he is beginning to think, okay, you know what? Maybe I can save Urziah, actually. This is going really well. And he also begins to rethink leaving Jerry behind. So, first, he goes after Urziah. And he sees that the handmaiden is heading towards the same area. And was she aiming for Calder now that he wore the mark of Kellerak, or were he and the handmaiden simply heading to the same place? Either way, it was a good reason to hurry. So I'm going to jump ahead here. But he tries to tell Urziah it's time to leave, and Urziah is like hyper-focused. There is no getting through to him. It's like he doesn't even hear him at all. And this is so, like, because, we know what's going to happen. He is watching this fight, and Shara comes in, ducks, rolls, and her dark eyes were cold, empty, inhuman. Even the Liatheton had more passion in his expression than she did. It was the face of a woman who would kill him without hesitation and sleep soundly afterward. And he just looks at her and is like, oh, you are the bitch that got this whole thing rolling, and I need to kill you. Like, genuinely, this is just your fault, all of it, from beginning to end. Not exactly true, to be fair, but he sees it that way, and I can't blame him in some ways. So, he breaks her nose, yada, 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 yada. She winds up stabbing Uzziah. Hate it. Hate it. I like Uzziah. I hated it even when I wasn't in the perspective of somebody who was friends with him. You know, because, like, he's got a vibe. He's fun. And this, oh God, you guys, the knife, Calder, is just so overwhelmed by this fucking knife. Wisps of blazing green shot out from the shining knife, wrapping around Uzziah's body. Lights played like ball lightning around the gold hide wrapped around his upper arm, his vessel. Like a toppling statue, Uzziah fell over backward. His hatchets fell from limp hands. Calder could have been imagining it, but he thought he heard the weapon sigh contentedly. And then this chapter ends with, then the handmaiden of Nicothi tore off the roof, which is exactly the same sentence that ends this whole section in Shara's book, which is fun. So yeah, that is the end of this section, and we just have one more. One. And then the book is over, and I'm very sad over it. I'm not sure if George is going to book the other ones, but I will keep you guys all informed. So, and again, I will be covering Reaper in January, so stay tuned for that. All right, I have to wrap, but thank you guys again for listening. I hope you're enjoying the coverage, and I'll be seeing you again soon with the last episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.